All right. Well, thank you, everybody. First of all, it's a privilege to be here. I want to take a minute to thank Anatoly, the IMTC, and I really have a lot of slides here. So what I'll try to do, my purpose is I want this presentation to be a resource for you, and I definitely want the dialogue to continue. I don't know if I'll have the chance to present these. I'll zoom through some of them, but I'll be available during Q&A and after lunch, like during lunch and so forth, and I would like to keep a dialogue open. So I'm basically going to talk a little bit about the state of the market, high-level technology overview, some future trends and conclusions. Please keep in mind the following. I am trying to kind of give both an enterprise and a consumer angle. I think the lines between enterprise and consumer are getting more and more blurred. If you look at what's happening with the tablet phenomenon, for instance, where people are buying these tablets and then they go to their enterprise guys and they say, well, make it work and run here. So this is a little bit of the dynamics that's happening, and it has to do with that whole dynamic of work-life balance. So we're seeing this more and more. So I'm an enterprise guy because in my previous lifetime, I did work for Nortel. I used to work in the enterprise division. So when I started at Frost & Sullivan, where I've been working for the past 10 years, I've actually, for the first 5-6 years, I was doing a lot of enterprise stuff. But now I'm a little bit more on the carrier side. But that's good because it gives me a different perspective. So hopefully I'll be able to provide that to you. So let's keep zooming. First of all, a collection of thoughts, some general trends. This is a professor from Northwestern, Mohan Swani. He's talking about how global firms are sort of becoming more and more sort of spread out. So just think of the key takeaway from the slide as the core is shrinking, the periphery expanding. So you have that global enterprise. In a way, we're not that big, Frost & Sullivan as a firm, but we do have some of these centers for excellence. So one of them being Toronto, where I actually I'm lucky enough to work. So you have each geographical entity with a strong set of local market-facing capabilities, but then you become you take leadership for a certain area, and then you're called upon other regions of the world sometimes, and that's kind of one trend, the globalization, so the future of the firm. I think another one is this Professor Tapscott, who is actually a prof at the University of Toronto, who's talking about how increased collaboration is becoming more and more of a productivity driver. So I don't know how many of you, show of hands, how many of you have heard of Wikinomics? Have you read a book? No? Okay, Phil, I see some hands here. Well, basically, it's one of the productivity drivers is what's going to actually, this mass collaboration and the ability for teams to kind of work together on some problems. And we certainly do this ourselves as an organization, because sometimes you got to leverage different talents, and you got to collaborate really fast. So it's really a good opportunity to help drive productivity in the enterprise. Of course, if you look from an enterprise perspective, that quest to squeeze out that extra productivity, it's difficult, because you end up getting all these different kind of siloed solutions. You have all this. I have a laser, this conferencing, tools and portals. You have all these different endpoints that you got to support: presence and IM, calendaring, enterprise apps, productivity software, emails. How do you really help out the user? And you drive more and more complexity. It becomes very, very difficult. You think of the good old mum test. People always think about that for consumer products, but sometimes you may need something like that for an enterprise, because not everybody that's going to be using an enterprise solution sometimes is a knowledge worker. Sometimes you got to think about like an office admin who may use it, or let's say someone who does not have time to ramp up. Even could be someone who's even on the field trying to address customer issues, and sometimes they really need to be able to figure out quickly how to hack with the system and make it work. They really don't have the time to learn this. So, you have to kind of simplify some of those, and it's difficult. That KISS principle kicks in. But it is a challenge. So, this gives rise to something some of my colleagues have defined as the unified conferencing collaboration paradigm. So, again, simplifying communications through integration. Again, too many emails in an inbox or too much time, that you spend tracking, who's present where. It's really, could that sort of enhance productivity, or is that going to really help things out? It's difficult to answer. I mean, I think we're more and more in a world where we see, for instance, let's say I'm trying to reach Phil. I'm trying to call you and your line is busy. I think sometimes I don't have time, and so it's what's called the notify A, in the carrier world. Is the A party and the B party. A party calls the B party. B party is busy. So then I get a notification when the B party, the person I'm trying to reach, becomes available. This is really, I think is the future. And I keep thinking, geez, why don't they come up with something like that for contact centers? Sometimes I don't have the time. How many of you have heard the working disconnect? You call in a contact center and you're sitting there waiting, and it's Dogware technical support, and you say, well, how can I disconnect you? And he says, I will take the working disconnect. I'll just keep you on hold for so long that you're going to hang up because you're going to be frustrated. You don't want to listen to the music being played. So, so wouldn't it be cool if I had some way of sort of saying, okay, just ping me when the agent is available. That way I pick up the phone and I'm talking then. This is really the type of productivity we're talking about. It's becoming more and more a mobile world, and you know who this guy is. I don't need any introductions there, but really the ability to connect any device to any content, anytime, anywhere, in any mode. That's another goal. A very, very difficult goal. And especially because enterprises are becoming more and more mobile. So you see here, this is kind of cool. You see like the percentage of time that people are spending. You have some desk people like that are the software designers, some on-site rovers, some site wonders like the IT troubleshooters. They may end up spending a lot of time on site, but maybe different splits of time being spent at their desk or elsewhere. Similarly, you have a lot of people working off-site who may end up, let's say a remote teleworker could be a remote agent, is 100% of the time at their desk. You could have an off-site rover, a consultant type who may be 30% at their desk, 70% on the road. That's kind of like yours truly here. A road warrior who could be a sales guy who's typically just going out and selling and spending a lot of time on the road. Or that global cruiser who could be more or less 25% across. So, again, the challenge is being able to, increase the probability of successfully reaching someone right on the first attempt. Hopefully with presence, it's a step towards that goal. In mathematical terms, a necessary but not sufficient condition. Again, the amount of time that you spend away from your desk, hopefully the one of the promises of UC will be actually being able to better connect people. Now, I want to tell you a story about the predecessor to UC. In a way, I view UC as kind of an evolution, and we're going to define it shortly. But many people considered unified messaging, how many of you remember that, as the predecessor to UC, because that was really the first attempt to integrate a variety of different messages, whether it be emails, voicemails, and faxes, all in a single client experience. It doesn't have to be a single storage point. And certainly Nortel solution back in the day, Copilot, it had actually a separate message store for faxes and emails. It was not necessarily, but they integrated together in a single client, right? There was the unified architecture which said everything has to be stored in the same single point of storage, right? And then people said, okay, we'll add some presence, some real-time features, and then it became UC. But I'll tell you this story about Nortel. This is in the lab where I used to work once upon a time. They developed Copilot, and actually we had it available to us for free, quote unquote, because we were Nortel employees. So actually Copilot people used to want us to dog food the stuff so we could actually give feedback and so forth. And it was amazing because, of course, I took the time to download the client. But I was shocked when I heard this stat from John Myers, who was at that time the VP GM for messaging, who actually sent a very angry email to all the employees saying, you guys have this stuff available for free, and it's a great app, and how come you're not using it? It was like 30% take rate, and the stuff was there on a silver platter for us to use. And it was amazing because, you know, when I saw that, and surely after his email, you know, people started using it, but it was always that factor of a nice to have, but not necessarily a must have. But the truth is, once you started using it and incorporating it in your daily life, you really became a big fan of it because you realized, holy smolies, this is really powerful stuff and it's really cool, you know. So that's something for you to think about. I'll just tell you, when I joined Frost & Sullivan in 2001, I missed my Copilot so much, and we didn't have it, unfortunately, client. So actually, for a while there, I was subscribing as a consumer. Sprint Canada, back in the days before they were bought by Rogers, they had a hosted UC, which was actually also a bunch of ex-Nortellers that started. There was a little company called Centrinity. And I was using that because I was hooked. I couldn't live without But anyway, talk about some of the trends, you know, from CIOs, and we often talk to enterprise CIOs. Virtualization is now probably one of the leading themes. Cloud mobility on the rise. Again, whole bunch of different aspects, and certainly you got a whole bunch of enterprise vendors beginning to take steps towards that. People like Mitel Networks putting their IP co-processing software on a VMware blade. But I would say it's probably shifted beyond the early adopter phase. Again, more conservative IT organizations are trying to virtualize and automate core IT and deliver what I call IT as a service to their users. And again, the goal is to shift the budget from 80% support, maintain, and 20% new investments to 60-40, and then hopefully that's going to take a while, but go to 40-60 with more investment in innovation and a whole bunch of new initiatives. Also, another emerging focus, support for any device anywhere and provide mobile access to corporate systems. Again, consumerization of IT and mobile users with their iPads and smartphones, because they're coming in and they're telling their IT guys, hey guys, support this. And that's certainly one of the key takeaways that I had in Barcelona, seeing companies like Video, one of the forums there that they had, and even some of the traditional enterprise vendors. I had a really cool demo from Polycom showing their telepresence and how they're now enabling mobile clients, so you could actually get the experience of telepresence on a mobile client. It's just a kind of a proof of concept, but still, this is coming. This is already something that we're beginning to see, and eventually, who knows? There's going to be some potential there. So, what are some of the other top communication trends we see? Again, primary form of communication moving away from voice to other means. So all this data-driven forms of communications, collaborative working, high expectations in terms of responsiveness. This is actually key. People really, it's no longer assumed. They expect you to be available anytime, anywhere, no matter where you are. And if I take too long answering an email, it's almost like it doesn't matter if it's the weekend. You're really, and that creates a big problem here because you have that, work-life balance and work-life branding. And so how can you basically achieve that balance? It is difficult. So talking a little bit about IP and the impact to messaging. Again, you have, Google and Apple, the over-the-top players again, and I really see that operators are becoming scared a little bit, at least on the mobile side. You talk to the mobile operators because they saw what happened on a fixed side. Once you start packetizing that voice and you put it on the same data network, there's competition. There's Skype. There's going to be a whole bunch of other players. So how do you handle that? Because right now there is that move towards voice over LTE or one voice, whatever people are calling it, because it did become the predominant standard. It did beat out Voga. So, how are you going to be able to do this? And also, look at social networking and some cannibalization of stuff like IM. It's funny, I was talking to Telefonica because, in Spain they're very, very popular with the Blackberries and they're using the BlackBerry IM, and they're worried because they say, well, with Facebook and some of these other social networks, and by the way, Telefonica was one of those operators that did try to start their own social networking. It was too late to the game, and it was a massive failure, So, but the question was, what's that's going to do to SMS, our SMS service, or what's that's going to do to that BlackBerry messaging service? Because people are now using Facebook, as a tool for IM. So is that going to cannibalize this? And what it basically means is that the operators are really scared of becoming a dumb pipe, or even, in a certain degree, even a smart pipe. They don't want to be relegated to that. So this is a graph from last year, and this is from this year. This is a famous Cisco VNI, and you saw that the data growth is continue to explode. So this is nothing new here, but basically 92% CAGR, 26 times growth from 2010 to 2014. This is actually mobile data, and you could see really that video is going to be the big driver. Just about two-thirds of the traffic will be video in 2015. That's putting a huge pressure on the service providers, by the way, to be able to support this, and especially in areas like backhaul infrastructure. So there's massive spending going on right now, and I'm just giving some data points from the U.S., from AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile. But the key takeaway here is this is happening very, very fast, and even the existing networks, they cannot handle this. If you look at backhaul systems, not too long ago, it was just T1, E1 lines. So think about, what kind of scale was required for those systems to kind of get to where they are today. And and clearly, it's going to be that migration going on from the older systems to microwave and also fiber. I'll say a few words now about video telephony. You got a little word of caution, because you have that value equation for video telephony, but sometimes you have some negative potential results. And I know some of us talked about this last night. You could have a bad hair day. Now I'm follicularly, is that the correct word? Follicularly challenged, so I don't have too many of those. But some people may have them, and they don't necessarily want to be shown when that happens. So show me what it's like there, the so-called push to see, show what you see. Sometimes, who knows, you might be showing something from your home, and then, oops, you have that little messy corner there that you don't want people to see, and it's there. Or let's say, how many of us do multitasking while we're in a conference call? Imagine now if that stuff is captured on video. I know some of us were talking about other more pernicious examples last night, but I was thinking more, just menial activities like reading your email or sideband communications with IM, or even a bio break, because sometimes I really need to go to the bathroom and I kind of just leave and go and come back. So it happens. With video, you no longer have the ability to do this. Again, link your video sensing to automatic presence is, you got a whole bunch of issues that you got to think of. And again, I think teenagers will definitely figure out a way on solving this. I think actually what's interesting is that, this is one of the takeaways. So you ask people how they ring the doorbell, how many of you would say with the index finger, right? I would say that's how I ring one. Teenagers these days, they go like this with a thumb. But why? Because they're so used to texting. That's how they, and that's your paradigm shift there. You got to think a little bit and get inside their heads before you could actually decide how you're going to do this. And again, there's a whole bunch of opportunities for avatars, personalized celebrity greetings, sticky bundles, etc. Let's quickly talk about technology and how we're doing for time. I have until 10:10, right? So I'm gonna keep on going. We've seen this, so I'm not gonna delve too much. I think what's interesting is how you see sort of took on a whole different meaning. Where you have like basically all these other things that, whether it be the conferencing, the telepresence, or some of those verticalized apps. It become an all-encompassing term, and it's really a framework. It's no longer that evolution of the app that was called UM, that you had presence and real-time elements, and it becomes UC. It became a much bigger thing, and that's why you have some of these big forecasts that some of us see every day about the UC world, and you keep wondering, is this history repeating itself with UM? Hopefully not, but nevertheless, part of the reason why those forecasts are so big is because it became an all-encompassing term framework. Now, what's interesting also, IMS, and that's making a comeback now. People thought, well, it's dead in the water because it never really took off in the mobile world. It was just on the fixed side, but now with 4G going on, what's happening is basically, you have that, that system architecture evolution, and basically you have the first mobile core network, which is by definition compliant with the IMS standard. So 3GPP actually, that's the recipe book for putting those voice packets on the data network is actually IMS. So that's why there's been a positive trickle-down impact on IMS. And now you saw people like NTT joining IMS and Gen Forum. You see, Verizon including IMS as part of their LTE announcement. I'm sure AT&T too, when they'll be launching 4G this year, they'll be definitely mentioned on that. And so it's making a comeback. And now this is the funny thing. People asked me to define IMS in layman's terms, and this came up yesterday in our dinner. So, you have Joseph's mustache and, Leonid's eyebrows. They're the same line of hair, except in the second case is vertically shifted upwards. So, of course, I had a little bit of French wine when I defined this back in 2005 in Cannes, the last time the show was held in Cannes. And I said that's a classical computer science solution to a problem. You don't really solve the problem, you just redefine it to a higher layer of abstraction. Some people felt about IMS this way, but there is potential because it's an access protocol and device agnostic spec that's going to enable some of that convergence to happen between fixed mobile network architectures. And again, the idea is, to be able to do some of this stuff, and just as an example, even Cable Labs is using as a blueprint for their packet cable spec. So, it's, again, an architecture of logical, not physical entities, and one of the common elements, the sticking glue is SIP, for call signaling between entities. And again, you have that layered approach to services with those three planes, the transport, control, and the application. So here it is, you just think of a way, you have that traditional stovepipe service model here, and here you have, a different type of approach where you take those common functions here like billing, OSS, QoS, presence, and you quote-unquote horizontalize them across all these different elements, and you put them in a control layer, and hopefully any application that you deploy later on will sort of fit in like Lego pieces in a puzzle, like when you build up, those are the building blocks. So that's really the promise of MS. You reutilize, oops, you left the meeting, Anatoly? You have some of those common functions that are reutilized, and hopefully could re-leverage some of those services. So now think about for a second, what can you do if you went ahead and you apply this IMS model into the enterprise? So again, you have this very complicated looking set of boxes and diagrams. I'm going to walk you through it. This is a simplified version. Think of the call session control function as the CSCF, which is the sort of the heart of the IMS architecture. This is the brains. The home subscriber server is that big centralized database where all the subscriber data resides. You have the media gateways, media resource functions, the transport layer, and the application servers. Now, if you take that to the enterprise, the CSCF will be replaced by the enterprise call management server. The HSS will be maybe the enterprise directory, could be an LDAP. Maybe you could have the audio bridge, the video MCU on the media side, and media gateways still supporting there for legacy PSTN, SDN support. You have carrier MPLS, enterprise WAN, and then the applications, unified communications, voice, video, web conferencing, again, presence, and then finally the access layer. Now, it's true, this is a little bit idealistic, but it could be an interesting blueprint in the future, and certainly some vendors we see maybe something similar to this, not necessarily this, but certainly Avaya has done that with Aura, and I could think of many other examples, but this is really the mapping, right? You have SIP, actually common here, the user interface, here, this is the personal communication manager, the presence, which is the user status on the instant messaging app, subscriber identity being the enterprise directory. The only thing different here is you don't really have subscriber charging. In the enterprise case, that's more user policy functions that you could specify. But you have the provisioning and system admin, and it's almost like a one-to-one mapping. So really, horizontalization can also be achieved somewhat in the enterprise. So the key takeaway is you have that functional decomposition in the carrier world becomes almost like a SOA-like architecture in the enterprise world. We also see consolidated hub architecture, sort of all these different silo-based messaging apps. Maybe sort of having that same concept that I was talking about the IMS before. You have, the subscriber data, the enablers like the NAT address book, presence, location, etc., and share components and a common OANM here. And so, again, this is sort of like a little bit of the future where you could really start seeing some really good OpEx savings that are going to be driven in the future. Let's talk a little bit about future trends. So, again, nothing new here. The key new elements for the enterprise, you have the SIP app servers. This is really where the value is. The call management processing servers, the brains, the media servers, which is the brawn. Again, you could have some of those that are general purpose or application optimized. Again, you have many different types of applications. Some could be purpose built, or some could be third party. Some could be actually application optimized, and certainly we're going to start seeing a lot of that. I mean, there's a whole bunch of companies that are doing a lot of interesting work on these types of optimizations. People like Byte Mobile, etc. Again, handle highly intensive technical applications and scaling higher. There's a big demand out there from service providers. They feel like in order to compete against the Googles of the world, they got to introduce new services faster to the market and shorten that time to market. And so, that's called service velocity or agility. And, so maybe that's another way of thinking about IMS that's going to enable to introduce new services faster and maybe fail existing ones faster and more cheaply, because why? They could be possibly recombined to create something new, which is something that would not happen in that silo-based world. Of course, the money is going to be in software and services. This is something we all know about. That revenue pie will probably change its composition. So hardware is becoming more and more commoditized, and you see, apps and services really going to be the future. And that's really an IT trend. And IMS is just another manifestation of what I like to call the ITification of the telecom industry. Vendors will have to focus on their key core competencies and know who to partner with. But again, services could become a very important backdoor to winning future business. Also, in terms of messaging, how can you talk about unified messaging, but can you really, from a consumer side now, I'm going to take the consumer angle now, you could start trading all these different message types from a particular user, let's say emails, voicemail, SMSs, and have a rules-based engine that adapts to that user preferences, and over time blending some of these enablers like the NAT address book, etc. You could start adding contextual presence, info location, and then offer what I like to call smart converged messaging, where the user selects what to send and who to send it with. Again, the operator cloud determines the status and equipment of the receiver, and then picks the best delivery mechanism for the message to be sent. And this will be an integrated experience. Maybe this will be something that you get, your launching pad for all these different apps is going to be your net address book, let's say. You know, let's say I just met Phil, all I know from him is his Twitter. So I say I want to communicate with him, so I want to send him something. So it will, if all I know on my net address book from him is his Twitter, it will automatically send him a tweet message. But let's say over time I start adding more information because I start getting to know him better. So I start knowing his email, start knowing his cell phone. So, you know, maybe the operator cloud could do something and maybe it could help figure out, you know, what's the best way for me to communicate with him. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about RCS, and a show of hands, how many of you know about RCS, the Rich Communication Suite? Okay, good. You know, just think of this. Without client devices, MS Core cannot really generate much value. So there weren't too many, you know, even though MS has done a terrific job at, you know, specking out all this network architecture, there was no specs that were available on the client side. So maybe that's one way of thinking about RCS. Let me just give you an example. The most successful IMS service today is a push-to-talk service at NTT Docomo. They have about 30 million subs. And they needed a spec when they had the clients that they wanted to put on the handsets. So they used the OMA push-to-talk IMS client spec. But that's it. It's a point solution. So something was needed. So there's a consortium that was created, which was called Rich Communication Suite, which was, again, created by the top 5 handset vendors and a whole bunch of operators and network equipment vendors. Again, the idea was to revitalize MS, drive a common spec for new apps. And it's very simple. Started with some presence-enabled address book, enhanced messaging, video telephony, like being able to start video chats, etc., and stimulate some interop testing. So in Barcelona just now at Mobile World Congress, they announced a new, they call it RCS Lite or RCS Enhanced. It's basically just a live IM and live video sharing and file transfer. And again, just the big 5 operators from Europe, so you know, Telefonica, Vodafone, Orange, Deutsche Telekom, and Telecom Italia Mobile, and Parity, Orascom, and SKTel and Telenor. Again, the idea is it is a step forward because they simplified RCS. So basically, instead of having present servers, they are using just dynamic capabilities discovery based on SIP. So, and we could talk about this in a second, Q&A after. So, you know, just a minor adaptation on RCS. So it simplified the interop, but at the same time, the issue that's still not solved is who's going to pay for this on the handset side. The handset vendors still have not recouped the original investment they made. And to me, that's where there's still big question mark on RCS, because I know the handset vendors, they're not going to do this, as they say in French, pour l'amour d'art, for the love of art, for the sake of art. They're going to, you know, want some money. The problem is, you know, you talk to people like Philippe Lucas from Orange, and he's going to say, well, you know, it's a small R&D investment, and they already made it, and so we're 5 big operators in Europe, and so we ask them to put it, they'll put it. It's not so clear to me, but still, it's a step forward because they simplified the spec a little bit, and, you know, so we will see what happens. I suspect there will probably be an RFP at some point later this year, probably Vodafone or Orange. So hopefully there'll be some movement. Again, big threat. All the operators we talk to, they're worried about over-the-top players. So the big threat in all this is that, you know, people like Apple and Google are not going to come in. You know, they could just bypass that whole, you know, RCS and LTE service layer and deliver their services over the top. And what can the carriers really do about this? You know, the only thing is, you know, asking the vendors to open up the interfaces, maybe try to solve ahead of time all those interworking issues, and maybe only after that worry about deploying new network capabilities. But, you know, of course, they know that, but it's hard. It's not easy. So concluding, you know, we see the evolution of business case for UC. This is where we are at right now, but it's going to continue. So, you know, certainly have gone above and beyond, you know, some of these initial tangible benefits like toll bypass, remote access to reduce TCO, operational efficiencies, and then productivity improvements. Now, this is really where the rubber hits the road, where you get integration with business processes, and that's going to take time. But this is where we're at right now. again, start thinking of some IMS-like benefits to the enterprise, elements to consider. You have, the possibility of having, true convergence of voice, video, data, scale and scope, and administrative complexity, cost reductions. There's a whole bunch of benefits, but again, you got to think of a full solution, proven vendor, standards compliance, apps, and all these other points. This is a key point too. How are you going to be able to create a new ecosystem to drive change and be able to compete against the Google and Apple? It's very difficult, but we started seeing maybe a little promise. The GSMA has this WAC, the Wholesale Application Consortium, which is it's kind of interesting. But the idea is, traditionally the telcos have only worried about their downstream customers, which are their subscribers. If somehow in the future they could start thinking about the upstream customers, could be developers, retailers, government, brand advertisers, content owners, where they could really start monetizing some of their assets and embrace that two-sided business model. Instead of worrying so much about becoming dumb providers, we could be in a really cool world. So how many of you know, I'm just thinking of two-sided business models. Just think of ladies' night at a pub, right? The ladies get in for free because the pub knows that, the gentlemen who come in and they will subsidize, they'll kind of pay for the drinks and so forth. The telcos have been good at doing this, but only to a very small degree. So the only two-sided business service out there is toll-free, right? Now, NTT Docomo with iMode, part of the reason why they were so successful is they really decided to open things up and say, okay, let's try to give third-party app developers, let's open up our network a little bit and give third-party app developers an opportunity to put some of this stuff up on the network, and we'll just leverage one element here. I have a whole bunch of lists here, and one could be just this thing. This is what NTT Docomo uses, fine-grained billing systems. So they'll just do billing on behalf for those guys, and as long as they pass a qualification test and they know that their application does not crash the NTT Docomo network, they could put it up in the network, and they will take whatever 10% cut, right, and do billing on behalf for them, and and that's why NTT Docomo today is still the most successful data service out there in the world. Well, other than SMS, of course, but still, this is really maybe we're going to start seeing some movement here. And again, a whole bunch of different things they could leverage. Their brand, their subscriber identity, subscriber data. That's really the crown jewel of the operators. Customer relations, connectivity, etc. So, again, if service providers start focusing on this two-sided models and upstream customers and open up the interfaces to enable third-party app developer, maybe we'll have a really cool world. All right, so I think we're out of time. I'll just make